Now, tonight's event is part of VMF Winter Arts, which is an awesome festival that transforms downtown Vancouver into an open air gallery with art and music events that connect all of us. So I want to thank the team at Winter Arts for this partnership, but also for putting on such an amazing festival. Now, this is the last week of the festival. So if you haven't checked it out yet and you're in Vancouver, I highly recommend that you go explore. Now, if you're not in Vancouver, go check out their Instagram so you can get a taste of what it's like to be there. They're posting all these amazing stories all the time, so you can get a feel for what it's like to be in the festival. We're going to share a link in the chat now so you can see all the upcoming performances and events. Personally, I would suggest that you don't miss going on Saturday to the Hub. So the Hub is the physical place where the festival is happening behind the Vancouver Art Gallery. And there's a thing called Public Disco, which is a really fun thing to do on a Saturday night, especially after we've been deprived of dancing for so long. So check it out, and I hope you all make it there. I also want to thank Electronic Arts for generously supporting this event. So thank you for making it happen. Now, tonight, we are here to get to know some of the artists and designers who work on virtual reality and some of the people involved in this festival. But more specifically, to learn how the virtual worlds that they create can help increase empathy in the real world. So I'm very excited to introduce today's speakers. So Julia, Tim, Doaa, Elliot, and Paisley, can you please join me on stage? Hello, nice to see you all. Paisley, we want to see you too. Turn your video on. Yeah, there we go.
Sorry, my internet failed for a second.
Lewinson works at Electronic Arts as a senior producer for Apex Legends. He has 2 decades of experience in software development, where he's worked on all sorts of games, including free-to-play gaming, mobile gaming, third-person action, first-person shooters, real-time strategy, and sports titles. Thanks for being here, Tim.
Thanks for having me.
Doaa Magdy is a Nubian Afro-Indigenous interdisciplinary artist. Doaa works in documentary filmmaking, dance, and photography, along with her latest endeavors to integrate augmented reality as a tool to amplify BIPOC narratives that highlight racial and social injustices. She is currently pursuing her 2nd MA degree at SFU School of Contemporary Arts. Thanks for being here.
Elliot, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Elliot Whites-Hill is a Coast Salish artist and storyteller from the Snuneymuxw First Nation. His practice is rooted in honoring and celebrating the teachings and stories passed down by his community, and to share what he finds beautiful and profound about the Coast Salish worldview. He currently resides on the territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, and is an MFA candidate at Emily Carr University of Art and Design. Nice to see you, Elliot.
Awesome.
And Paisley Smith is a filmmaker and virtual reality creator from Vancouver. She received an MFA from the University of Southern California School of Cinematic Arts in television and film production, where she was a Fulbright scholar among 3 other scholarships that she had. I'm not going to name all of them. Paisley is a senior civic media fellow at the USC Annenberg Innovation Lab, Unity Technologies, where she leads the Unity for Humanity program. Paisley is also the creator of VR Exceeded Territories with artist and activist Lawrence Paul Yuxwilukton. And she's also created the award-winning VR film Homestay, produced by the National Film Board of Canada. Now, as uses world-building skills to design solutions for deeper connection and to imagine our feminist future. Now, to moderate the conversation tonight, we have VMF Winter Arts curator, Julia Bruk. Julia is a Soviet-born creative director and a new media artist and a community facilitator based in Seattle. Now, she has worked in digital marketing for the past 8 years at a tech corporation, and she recently founded a global community arts tech organization called Future Arts to build dignity for artists working with technology. Amazing to have you all here. Now, I'm going to tell the audience what we're going to do. So we're going to have a conversation for about 40 minutes, and then at the end, the panelists are going to take questions for the audience. So for the audience, I want to ask you to please use the Q&A button to submit your questions. That way we'll have them all organized in one place and it'll be easier to read them. But if you don't like the Q&A button, it's fine. You can submit them in the chat. It won't kill us. We'll manage. On that note, please keep a civil and respectful tone in the chat. So that's it from me. Let's get this started. Julia, take it away.
Thanks so much, Jorge. Thanks everyone for being here. Thanks for the artists and creatives and anyone on the other side of this digital portal that we're creating today. I think it's in theme of meta self, which is Winter Arts theme in the AR space that I curated. We here together are creating an empathetic space just by being together and sharing each other's stories and listening. So thanks for doing that. So you already heard my intro. I'm Julia. I'm the curator and a founder and creative director. While we are showing up from our creative selves, we're also showing up as people, as humans. And I wanted to kind of ground us in our nature of being empathetic in how we show up as also myself saying I'm a daughter, I'm a granddaughter, a sister, I'm a friend, a best friend, a lover, a female, or sometimes non-binary presenting human, growing up in a different culture. So we are bringing with us a lot of experiences in our lives that we can't all know. So I think that was the most interesting part of this talk, is that everyone that's presenting here today comes from very different backgrounds, both in who they are as humans, but also in their practice as artistic and creative beings. So I'm really excited to see how we all interact and talk about this topic. So, with the pandemic pushing forward more of these opportunities to gather in a digital space, it's opened up and allowed us insight into a more global exchange of learning and understanding each other's experiences and carrying all these identities together and sharing them with these emerging technologies. So how does empathy show up? What does empathy mean in a space that doesn't have all the sensorial opportunities that the world has? So we're going to welcome all of our artists and first go around and allow kind of initial thoughts and introductions of the 4 panelists we have with us today on the topic we're discussing. And then we're going to launch into more deeper conversation. So I'm going to share a little screen to allow the people who aren't familiar with the work of our creatives to have just a little taste of visually their work. And I encourage everyone to go and visit Winter Arts, and 2 of our featured creatives have artwork in the festival to experience that with all your senses. But meanwhile, we'll do our best to give a little quick intro visually of what the work looks like. All right, here we go. Okay, so we'll start with Tim. Hi, Tim. I'll hand it over to you to talk about who you are and how empathy plays into your role.
Great. Thanks, Julia. So hi, everybody. My name is Tim Lewinson. I'm senior producer at Respawn at Electronic Arts, and I'm senior producer on Apex Legends. I've been in the industry for over 20 years now. Actually started my career at EA, working on FIFA 96 and the original Need for Speed. So I've been doing this for a while. Worked at Relic, senior designer at Disney, ran my own studio for a while, and happy to be back at EA and working at Respawn and really working on a game like Apex. So quick background on what Apex Legends is about. It's a free-to-play hero shooter game that we launched in February 2019. Legends, the characters in the game, they fight for glory and fame and fortune on the fringes of the frontier, and it's out on PC and PlayStation, Switch, and Xbox. And starting next week, we're actually doing a limited regional launch for iOS and Android. So we're hitting pretty much every platform out there that we can. Now, legends are playable characters in Apex Legends. So each legend is a unique character that has their own backstory, abilities, and play style. And one of the things that I think is a central pillar for how we build our legends in our game. Well, I'm just going to take the quote directly from our design director, Evan Nikolic, who helped break it down for me earlier today when we were talking about this. So Apex is a diverse and inclusive world that inspires hope. If you take anything away from this talk regarding our title, it's that. The Apex universe, it attracts people from all walks of life. And that diversity and that inclusivity of that world is our game's superpower. Don't get me wrong, the gameplay is top notch. We're running around in our game, feels fun. The gunplay is excellent, but we do something that a lot of other titles in this space simply do not. It's a world where people want to escape to and they can feel empowered. And it's a world where people want to immerse themselves in, share their stories, cosplay, bring their friends into it, and make incredible art. If you search Apex fan art on Twitter, you'll be under a deluge of incredible artwork that our fans are putting together every single day based on these characters. Now, when I say we are building empathy into our games, it's about making sure that people feel represented when they see the legends in our game. So when the game first launched in February 2019, we launched with characters that are gay, that are non-binary, that are lesbian, two Black characters in the game, like out of the gate. Now, a lot of us, we look around and we're like, okay, that's fine. That's just how the world works. That's the world that we live in. But there are a lot of games that don't reflect that. And as a result, we are trying to sort of establish that blue ocean, a much wider variety, and make sure that we're appealing to as many people as possible. For me, growing up, the only time I would see Black characters in the video games that I played were usually in the sports titles like Madden and NBA Live and FIFA, which is fine. Obviously that's where, we're represented, but I also wanted to see myself in the adventure games. I wanted to see myself in the puzzle titles. I wanted to see myself in the racing games where you have an opportunity to create your own avatar. And for the most part, those opportunities were pretty rare, pretty few and far between. And so for a game like Apex, which is one of the top shooters in the world, we have an opportunity to reach a much wider audience so that the next generation of game players, kids, who, like myself, are looking to see themselves in the games that they play and the media that they consume, can now see it. And it's part of the process, and it's just normal. It's not something special. You're not checking off some box. It's not, what's my favorite term, forced diversity. It's reality. And it's a reality that everybody gets to deal with and gets to enjoy and gets to see themselves in. And so at a high level, and sorry, Julia, I know that I'm kind of running off with it a little bit, but that's where we see empathy as part of, the core pillars of what makes Apex Legends, what it is and why it has that appeal.
Thanks so much, Tim. Not at all. Yeah, thanks for sharing about this game. I'm really excited to play it one of these days. All right, next we have Doaa, who is one of our presenting artists at Winter Arts, VMF. And here's a little walkthrough of the piece that's currently up on the Vancouver Art Gallery Plaza. So as that plays, Doaa, I'll hand it over to you to talk about yourself and how empathy plays into your work.
Thank you, Julia. Hi, everyone. My name is Doaa, pronouns she, her. In my artwork, I'm really interested in amplifying the voices that were not represented, with specific focus on BIPOC, because growing up, I almost never saw anyone that looks like me within the technological space, or even I'm a huge fan of horror. I started watching my first horror film when I was 5, and I found it very addictive, specifically in the space of horror, for example, where every time I watch a horror movie, people who look like me are the first one eliminated. And I remember I was 6 and I told my mom, you know what, Mom, one day I'm going to make a horror film and the person like me will survive until the end. But Jordan Peele started that, unfortunately. So Yeah, it's really important. Like, I'm always interested in looking for ways for alternative storytelling. I'm really interested in visual storytelling. How can we tell stories visually, whether it's through photography, videography? And that what inspired me to create Dynamic Diasporas. I wanted to find a way to narrate BC's Black history that's overlooked and understudied, unfortunately, but at the same time, not relying on textbooks, because textbooks are not accessible to everyone. And linguistically, also, they're very complicated. For me, someone whose first language is not English, I kept that in mind while creating this project. Also, VMF created a great opportunity of having this open space kind of gallery, which is free, because for BIPOC individuals, unfortunately, when we talk about galleries and museums, are not really as accessible to us financially, and also, like, from my experience, getting followed around the museum or having to act in a certain way. So this was a great opportunity to make it more accessible to folks. And when we're looking at the pictures of the Black pioneers in Dynamic Diasporas, I also thought about accessibility. Like, what if someone doesn't have the privilege of owning a cell phone to scan the QR codes? How can we make it more accessible? So for those who don't have the privilege of the cell phone, they can actually read like a brief description of the contribution of each Black pioneer and still have an idea and embody this experience. Also, I'm really interested in integrating dance as a way of visual storytelling. So Dynamic Diasporas has a part 2 that's going to be Sunday, February 27th at 3 p.m. Basically, the dancers will be personifying some of the Black pioneers and telling their stories visually. Because for me, for example, as a neurodivergent person myself, I can't always rely on text to just get an idea. So how can we narrate that visually? And it's really important to think of those alternate ways of narrating, because it creates empathy. That's the truth. Like, when someone is fearful of something, like, for example, I always reference horror, which is my passion. Horror reflects the fear of the other, whether the other, we're talking about race, gender, space, different land, because they don't know a lot about it. So how can we amplify those voices so that way people have an idea about their stories, and building that empathetic relationship between different communities? And this is something that we really need these days, because the pandemic just fractured human connection, but at the same time, the virtual space highlighted that we are all interconnected, and it made it more accessible to access different spaces, different countries, and even social activism. We cannot underestimate the power it had during the pandemic and everything. And yeah, that's a brief description about my artistic approach. Thank you.
Thanks, Doaa. I know you had a slide to share. Did you want to bring that up real quick?
Sure, I will share it very quickly. Give me 1 second. Can you all see? Yes, okay, perfect. So I'll just talk very briefly. As I mentioned earlier, I'm really interested in visual storytelling. If we're talking about photographies, just observing what stories can we conclude from those photographs. I rely a lot on color. And again, I keep in mind the accessibility. If someone doesn't have access to colors, what stories are they telling? And how can we create alternative spaces and stories to just give our message to the audience, and also highlighting the different facets of the Black identity. Like, Black is just not static. And very briefly, I'm working on a horror project. I'm not gonna share so many details, but I'm really interested, again, in amplifying the BIPOC perspectives in this, especially that the horror space, there are very few BIPOC women that are in this space, and I really want to be one of the pioneers, hopefully one day. While also, I don't have dialogues in my project, because again, I want everyone to interpret the story from their own perspective. Like I'm the person personally who goes to a museum, or even when I go to VMF, I don't read. I first experience the AR, for example, before reading what it's about. And then I'm like, oh, okay, so this is what it's about. This is what I thought. And I feel this is actually the beauty of art. Like each one experiences it in a different way. And yeah, we're all interconnected as humans, and we all have our stories. By starting by sharing different ways of storytelling, this like brings us closer together. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Doaa. All right, I'm gonna get back in here and throw it over to Elliot. All right, go ahead, Elliot.
Thank you. Siamna Siaya, Anthape Kwalasalton Tanitsanakls Nanemo, Haitseepka Kwanzalops Kakipa Tanakwel. Hello, everyone. My traditional name is Kwalasalton. I come from the Snuneymuxw First Nation in Nanaimo, and I'm really grateful to be here speaking with you all today. Yeah, so I'm a co-Salish artist and storyteller. My practice is really rooted in honoring and celebrating the stories and teachings that have been passed down to me through my community and through my family. And really my work is rooted in the work that my late great grandmother did, who, Dr. Ellen White Colossal-Wood, who worked her entire life as an educator, as a storyteller, as a linguist, in all sorts of fields, working to preserve and pass down our teachings and make sure that they'd be there for future generations. And really to share with each other, to share with others, and to find commonality with people in the world. Through her work, I've found that, this connection that is formed becomes a place of understanding and where empathy can flourish. And that in that connection is also where the work of reconciliation can be advanced. So my work in this project has really been about this philosophical principle called Aitshkwelowin, which comes from our teachings. It means to be of good mind. And so with Aitshkwelowin, what my great grandma would talk about was how you have to really work to open yourself and to keep the negative energy away. And really it's about opening yourself so that you can connect with the energy of the land, with the energy of the world, with the energy of each other as people. And that, as you start to open yourself, you realize that help is there and that there's good energy there to connect with. And they talk especially for artists, that as you work to maintain that state of Aitshkwelowin. And so in thinking about that, I also thought about the way that the knowledge was transferred traditionally. And, the stories that my great grandma would talk about and the old people would talk about, how the elders who raised the children would bring everyone down to the beach, and they'd sit on the beach in a circle and they'd say, you sit and you listen. And that's where the stories were told. And, that's how knowledge was transferred for us traditionally. And so this installation kind of is reflective of that and honors that, but also thinking about the modern ways that knowledge is transferred and our modern ways of connecting with each other. And how, for my practice as an artist, so much of it has been digital. I started sharing artwork on Instagram just a couple of years ago, and all of a sudden I found myself participating in this really incredible community of Indigenous artists all across Canada and across the world. And that, there's this amazing renaissance almost of Indigenous art taking place, and we're all participating in this community together and supporting each other and uplifting each other. And it was a really empowering and incredible thing to see. And, I think of with co-Salish art, particularly, this practice of Aitshkwelowin and engaging and participating, I think about like, what does this mean for us to communicate? And exactly, echoing what Doaa was just talking about with the lens of accessibility and participating in art spaces, I think that there's incredible potential that, the art doesn't necessarily have to be in a gallery, but it can be in a way where people are interacting with it, where it's educating people. And especially with public installations, I've had a couple public installations back home in Nanaimo over the past number of years. And in participating in that, I've seen that the way that people interact with the art and the way that it has the potential to recontextualize space, especially as Nanaimo territory in Nanaimo. And that's one thing that's so amazing about this project that I've seen with the Blanketing the City project with Debbie Sparrow, seeing the Coast Salish art and Coast Salish culture coming back to the surface in really powerful ways, and in ways that are affirmative of our teachings and our art and our traditions and our experiences. So it's been a really, really incredible experience working on this. And I'm so grateful to be here speaking with you all today.
Thank you so much, Elliot, for sharing that. And I was just there up in Vancouver. I'm Seattle based, but I was there on Monday and got to experience your piece. And it was really interesting to me how it became peaceful, even in the urban space, to be amongst the AR. So yeah, we can talk about that later more. I want to continue with Paisley, a filmmaker and virtual reality creator. Paisley, go ahead and introduce yourself and your artwork and how it relates to empathy.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. My name is Paisley. My pronouns are she, they. So I should say that I kind of have a unusual kind of weird body of work, and I wear multiple hats. So on the one hand, I am a virtual reality director and filmmaker. And then on the other hand, I currently have, I work for Unity Technologies as I run a program called Unity for Humanity, which supports creators to make social impact work. So I wear multiple hats, and right now we're really focused on community building and accessibility and getting tech into the hands of creators. In both roles, empathy and passion are definitely things that are so important to me and the way that I respond to work and I'm driven to create. To me, one of the things I do in my personal practice is really think about how virtual spaces can motivate action outside of the screen. So that's what I'm really, really interested in. And for that practice, I pull from how we interact with space and action and how we touch and feel the world around us. So I really I just stole this quote from the internet, but I love it. The tactile quality of handmade crafts and drawing and painting and how we can bring these things into virtual spaces. So my undergraduate degree was in film theory and then art history, and I've really always been inspired by performance art and just crafting, I guess. And so yeah, there's kind of a clear connection between those tactile things in the virtual worlds that I've worked on. So here on this page, you can see a couple of different projects that I've worked on, and then on the low tech side of things, I'm really obsessed with making GIFs and stickers for the internet, because to me, in some ways, they're the most accessible form of digital art. And they're so, I just saw a meme on the internet where they were making fun of millennials for liking GIFs. They're outdated and uncool, but I'm whatever, okay. GIFs have been here since the beginning of the internet. They're not going anywhere, so I'm sorry. Anyway, so here you have Homestay, which is a project that I created with the National Film Board of Canada, and that's based on a family experience that I had here in Vancouver. And I have sort of touched on this topic here in Vancouver before, but actually not in a really long time. And it's funny, talking about it, it always really stresses me out, honestly. So the project is a virtual reality experience that is a mix of documentary filmmaking and kind of a research-based exploration of this thing that happened in my family, this experience that we all shared. I should probably give you a trigger warning. I'm going to talk about suicide. My family's often hosted international students from all over the world, especially when I was growing up in Vancouver. it's pretty common here. A lot of people from all over the world travel to learn English, and it's a beautiful place. And, you know, one of the things that's really important to note is that so many kids are coming to Canada, and especially Vancouver. And every year it gets younger and younger, the kids that are coming from other places and aren't necessarily with their support systems and living with families who don't always understand the context of these experiences. Anyways, I say that to say that we're like to give you this story, I guess, that I created this project about our student who took his life by suicide at our house in Canada, and the impact of that on my family. And it's a really intense experience in the process, but also in the experience of going through the project, I guess. You basically go to the Natobi Memorial Gardens that are up at UBC in a papercraft version, and the world and the story unfolds around you in this sort of like fragile paper world. There's an obvious kind of like thematic tie to origami, which I really liked that it was so like obvious and kind of annoying in that sense. Like there's this cultural exchange that we do when we travel, that we give away like maple syrup or whatever. And, you know, that kind of like very surface level exchange of information is what was really like a motivator, and it's kind of the style of the project. And anyways, also this like fragility of paper and the disintegration of paper when it gets wet and all of these different things. I'm not sure how much time I have to talk. So do you want to just cut me off at some point, or shall I talk about unceded territories a little bit?
Yeah, I think you can talk a little bit more, and then we can launch into more of a discussion, but it's just so fascinating to share stories. So yeah.
Okay. So basically I found working on Homestay very depressing, and it was very depressing, and it was a really long process to create this project. And I should share for anyone who's like watching and doesn't really know what I'm talking about when I say VR or virtual reality, what you've seen is like Tim's projects were a game. So that's like, obviously you can game and, you know, go on a computer and play this game, or you have like software or gaming tools to game, right? Like controllers and all those kinds of things. And then VR is like a contained world where you put yourself into a headset, or you could watch it on a screen, but it really is like a thing that you go into and you're kind of isolated from the world. And then Elliot and Doaa's projects are both AR. So that's like, obviously you can see the physical world through the project, and it kind of can have like a combination of things that occur. Does that kind of like give you a shell? Yeah. And obviously there's a lot more that happens in all of those things, but that's just like the kind of the medium difference of unceded and homestay versus like AR. It's like you're contained, you're kind of like trapped in these places, and you have something on your head. that's it in a nutshell. And so when I was creating Homestay and I worked with a number of different collaborators on the project, it was a really like intense creation project process, and it took a long time. And I actually started to question, like, what do I like? Who am I? What am I into? Like, am I even an artist? Am I a filmmaker? Like, why am I doing this? I started to kind of lose the plot a little bit. And so one thing I did was I started looking to my younger experience of making work. I used to like make films and like cut on mini DV tapes and like, I don't know, make weird stuff. And I was like, that's what I like. And I know that to be true. So no matter how far I get from the path, I know that I can rely on those things I love to take me back to where I want to go. And so one of the things I did is I ended up ordering these like super nerdy, they are kind of nerdy, virtual reality texts from the 90s that kind of went with these different artist residencies that occurred across Canada and different North America. They were primarily North American texts. And the Banff Center actually in 1992 did this residency where they got this like supercomputer, one of the first VR capable computers in the world, or at least that's what I recall reading. I might be exaggerating. But anyways, Lawrence Polyak swapped in, who's a very well-known artist local to Vancouver, an activist. He actually was one of the first creators to make a virtual reality project in the 90s. And he made an incredible project that was actually recently exhibited at the Museum of Anthropology. I mean, it was before the pandemic, so it could be like quite a while ago now, but it was like in the actual installation in the gallery. People could go and see this computer system from the 90s and experience this project. And it was very powerful. It still is powerful, and it was powerful then, but it was a very welcoming project. It's for non-Indigenous audiences such as myself to come and experience his spiritual world. And I see it as a very generous act to allow non-Indigenous folks into that realm of the Longhouse and visit the spirit creatures that he represents in his art. And so we decided to collaborate and kind of create this very rebellious, kind of tongue-in-cheek project using the technology that I had been working in VR, and bring his art and all of his iconic sculpture and characters. The super predator is one of his main kind of like evil, greedy representation of capitalist evil, greed. And you basically don't know it, but you embody that character in this virtual world, and you destroy this virtual world around you. Anyways, I won't give it away, but that's it in a nutshell, and you can jump into the rest.
Thanks, Paisley. I think you bring up a good point. I'd love to open it up to the rest of us to talk about how it's been like to release these very personal stories or very specific individual stories into the general public through the digital space. So you've all done it in very different ways. As Paisley, you've kind of done an overview of, AR in a public physical space, Tim through gaming. How does it feel to watch people interact and give that feedback? I know as I talked to you all beforehand, you all had experiences of some sort of feedback from other people in experiencing your creations. And I'll just kind of, whoever wants to jump in and talk about that process for them.
So if you don't mind, I'll start. So we have millions of people playing Apex every month. So we get a lot of feedback. A lot of people have a lot of things to say about our game. You have legends that you become particularly attached to, whether it's play style or whether it's the actual character. And we are constantly making changes to characters and the way that they play in order to keep the gameplay fresh. So people will keep coming back and it doesn't get stale. However, you make a change to a certain character and you can be sure that several people will let you know exactly how they feel through Reddit or Twitter or whatever social media happens to be out there. That said, we have developed like a really good community, and there's toxicity everywhere, obviously. But I would say, having done this for quite some time, that the community that we've developed is actually one of the more supportive and welcoming communities that respects developers as well, which is big, which is huge. There's a lot of toxicity out there, and while we do deal with some of that, our fair share, it's certainly not as bad as I've seen in other communities. So, getting that kind of feedback, people understanding what it is that we're trying to do to make sure that we keep the game fresh, that we are inclusive when we're coming up with new characters. I will say that the feedback that we receive when we do release new characters every 3 months is outstanding across the board. People, they love the inclusivity that we apply, when we're coming up with new characters. When we talk about sort of the lens that we apply when we're looking at bringing new characters into the game, whether it's stuff like body diversity or ethnicity or socioeconomic status, things that you don't naturally think about when, hey, I got a gun, I'm aiming in the screen, and I'm going pew pew. There's much more to that, and our community appreciates the amount of work that we put into it. And as a result, the feedback that we get in that regard tends to be quite positive. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Tim. Anyone else have comments? Maybe the artists that are exhibiting in a public festival. How has it felt to watch people interact with your work?
Yeah, it's I think we were talking about this a little while ago, Julia, but just seeing the installation in person, and how so there on the one hand, where I was doing the design and thinking about it conceptually, I had all these different thoughts about how it might go, how people might interact with it, And then seeing it in person, it was totally different. And it was really different in an amazing way where, I was standing there sort of watching people interact, and I saw all these people hugging the inflatable sculptures, and I didn't expect that at all. And I loved that so much, this way of like connecting with the art, and that there was something about the way that, I don't know if it was like that they were inflatable or if they were the color of them or the way that it was designed. But people really felt compelled to like hug them. And I saw all these little kids running up and tackling them. And just that, how that made me think about that I want to make more art that people want to hug. And I want to make more art that people want to interact with in that way and to, really engage with. And that was just such a special thing that was so sort of spontaneous. Yeah, and that was just such a remarkable experience for me that I think is going to influence some of my practice going forward.
They were very huggable. I totally understood that when I was there. And like I said, additionally, the AR itself, like I said earlier, because it was circulating around me when I was experiencing it, it created sort of like this moment of thinking about what you were trying to say. And, after reading your description of it, and it's interesting how it provided a barrier of meditation around a space that was very loud and active, especially sensorially. So I think that AR and does that in a really unique way that is not experienced with any other emerging technology. So that was really amazing, just watching people kind of zone out but zone in to their reality. So that's incredible.
It really brought to mind this quote that I've seen shared by elders in my community about co-Salish art, and how Salish art is to make the sacred visible, is the quote. And thinking about that quote has really informed my practice a lot. And I, with the AR component, you're quite literally making the invisible visible and interactable. And I think that there's just so much potential there for creating space and, bringing in the same way, I think, to how Paisley was talking about the project with Lawrence Paul Yahuelupton, inviting people into a space and sharing narrative and context and really like transforming space, which is just such a powerful thing that's so in line with our traditional philosophy behind making art and storytelling.
Love that. Yeah, it literally, again, made me think of your grandmother and you sitting with her when the art came up around me. So it was quite beautiful. Thank you for that. Doaa, did you have some thoughts about watching people interact with your piece and the dynamic diasporas?
Yes, I just wanted to highlight first that the dynamic diasporas was initially going to be AR, but this whole project was made in like 2.5 or 3 months while I was having 3 jobs and full-time school. But Elliot, I love how you brought up that interactive piece when it comes to augmented reality and the touching, because touching and that human connection, this is something that we lost during the pandemic and definitely impacted our relationships. And just to clarify for those who came in later, virtual reality and augmented reality. Virtual reality is basically you need a device to put on your eyes and it takes you completely to a virtual world, while augmented reality basically connects you with, I don't know, should I call it unreal? But it's not unreal, like between the virtual and the real world. So you're immersed in both worlds, just to clarify the difference between both. I personally find there's a big importance of highlighting like the virtual world now, because we act differently in a virtual world. Even before VR and AR came out, if we look at gaming, like a person would be like, oh, okay, I'm going to shoot this person, I'm going to kill this person. This is something you would do in a virtual world, but you won't do it in the real world. I'm always interested in exploring how can we use the virtual space to introduce other approaches to have this human connection in a different way. And as an artist, I'm really interested in exploring stories and having stories of kinship between Black and Indigenous peoples because of our shared stories of systemic marginalization through colonialism or enslavement or both. And this was something that I wanted to integrate in my future PhD, but if there's a chance, like I don't have to spend 6 years in academia and I can actually work on this, it would be great. And last thing I would like to add, I really saw interconnection between horror and the virtual world because they both share this idea of fear of something new, the fear of something that we haven't explored before. And my dream is to integrate augmented reality within the horror world. And not only that, but also to make both those worlds accessible. Like right now, of course, they're kind of new technology, very expensive to make. How can we make this space, for example, accessible to someone that doesn't have a cell phone, scan QR code? Is there maybe a shared device we can allow people that don't have access to that? Because we have to acknowledge, like, of course, when we're talking about those digital spaces, it's a huge privilege to access them or even understand what they really are. And I would love to see more people from all backgrounds understanding and experiencing this different world. Thank you.
Love that. Thank you, Doaa, for that. Yeah, it's interesting bringing up just that global conversation again that is able to be had through the digital realm. I mean, even being in Vancouver and it is place-based, you know, if you're there physically, it is a very different feeling than someone somewhere else experiencing this work. But I remember, Elliot, you were saying how you opened your filter in your living room, and that's something interesting about augmented reality and really anything, you know, every emerging tech that each and every one of you use, you know, from a game, Apex games, like you're able to experience that from the comfort of your couch, but suddenly this world becomes yours and it could be at any point of the world. And this augmented piece can be in your living room and you can be immersed in it. And Paisley, with your work, you literally can just put on this helmet and you're present. And so it's interesting because the connectivity point can be from anywhere, but then you're there together. So I don't know, talk about that. How does that influence your initial seed of when you're ideating or when you see the future of this potential of where we're all meeting in this point, and it really doesn't matter where we are physically, yet we still have to be grounded in the stories of that land and of that culture and of who we are as individuals, because we don't want to lose that either. Any thoughts?
Okay, so I feel like I'm just going to keep starting first every time you come up with something.
Go for it.
Recognizing and making sure that you get it right is really important. If you want your empathy to be true, the last thing you want, and I think that people can see through it when you're just sprinkling diversity on top of what is the norm, as opposed to really taking the time to understand, to learn, to research, and get it right. And more importantly, I think that when you don't have people in-house, for example, when we're developing, say, a new legend, and we have made the decision that, hey, we want to go with a specific background. So for example, the New Zealand Maori people for the last character that we released just a few weeks ago, we do have New Zealand people on staff. We have New Zealand writers on staff. However, they don't have the wherewithal to be able to take that entire culture and to be able to distill it into this character in a way that is respectful and that makes sense. They can sort of get things started, but you need more. And so we actually work with authenticity editors. And this is paid work. We reach out and we make sure that the people who know, the people who are from these backgrounds, like I like to say, there are a lot of rooms that I'll never be in, that I've never been in as a cishet Black male. But I can pay people who are in those rooms and have chats with them and talk to them and say, hey, when you're thinking about characters that are aspirational to you, what does aspirational mean in your culture? what does that mean in terms of how a character moves, in terms of the clothing that they wear, in terms of, the words that they say, colloquialisms, things that I would never be able to come up with on my own. And I certainly want to Google and then go step in it. But you would know as somebody who's a member of that community. And so we partnered with different groups throughout the years. And again, this is a process that we're working on, and we're always trying to make it better. But that authenticity comes through in the characters, and that respect also comes through in the characters. Oh, we're not just taking a few cool words and sprinkling it in and calling it a day. From tip to tail, this needs to be authentic. It can't just be something that we're throwing in there to try and, like I said, score points. And so, when it comes to that kind of cultural empathy and making sure that, you get it right, it does take a little bit longer, but that's okay. That should be that's the price of doing business correctly. And if you're not doing it correctly, then why bother doing it at all? Especially because, like I said, to bring it back, people will see through it if you're not coming into it with the right frame of mind. So yeah, that's one of the things that we take very, very seriously with Apex, and for my group in particular, with the Legends team.
Wonderful. Any panelists have thoughts about that or responses? I also wanted to throw out there that we are almost 5 minutes out, but we will be extending about 10 minutes to allow for the Q&A. So please stay on. I know we're going to stay on and finish up, and we'd love to leave that room for questions in a couple minutes. So if anyone else has thoughts about this topic, and then we'll move on to questions after that.
I could share quickly. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go for it. I'm good.
Okay, Canadian standoff. Let's go. Okay. Tim, I really love Apex. Like, oh my God, I'm mind blown right now because I've been researching a lot Afro and Indigenous futurisms. For those that are not aware with this term, it basically highlights and centralizes the narratives of Indigenous and Black peoples, learning from the past and trying to reimagine a better or a future where we are the center of the narrative. And I think when we're talking about the virtual world and empathy, I look at it like we're all connected together for the same goal. So for example, if we're playing a VR game, we're playing in one team, we want to connect with each other, we want to win together. So that way it's like, no one cares what your race or gender is mostly, but basically your whole goal is to connect as humans and create that empathy. I'm super new to the VR world. I'm terrified of heights. Like, this is a very specific example. I don't know what happens to the brain when I'm in VR, but once there is a very high surface or something, oh my God, I'm gonna fall. But thanks to the teamwork, they're always like, you got this, girl, you got this, keep going, which creates that connection between humans. And also it's the same thing when we're experiencing art. Very recent example again of VMF Winter Arts. We're all going there to experience and be immersed in this art without focusing on anything else. And I find it it's a brilliant space to connect humanity, to be honest.
Love that. Thank you, Doaa, for sharing. I think this is a great time to open up for some questions. Jorge, I know you've been looking at gathering some for us. Maybe. Oh, Q&A, there's a button.
Yeah, if you just open up that Q&A button, I think all the questions are just listed right there.
Okay, so we've got a question for Tim. Aside from your characters, how do you approach some of the challenges of fostering empathy in a naturally competitive environment?
That's a really good question. I think that we have a high skill ceiling for Apex, but the opportunity to get in is actually very, very wide. The floor is quite wide. So anybody can hop in, and you're not good at first person shooters, that's okay. You can hop in, you can group with friends and have an amazing time just running around and blasting away. And we also have other game modes where it's not necessarily about the battle royale portion, but there's like things that you can do and work together as a team, a much larger team, and to be able to, take over different points and, win together as a team. There's aspects of public games versus ranked games. Ranked games are where the more professional type players will go and have a good time and try to make their way up the ranks. Public games, a little less sweaty, I guess is the term that we like to use. And it makes it a little more open, a little more fun for everybody. So sure, it's naturally competitive, and that's the nature of the gameplay that we're presenting. We make no bones about that, and we're not trying to get past that. But if we make sure that the door is as wide as possible, so anybody of different skill types can come in and find a place that works for them, find a seat that works for them, and have a good time, that's good. In fact, that's better than good. That's great. And the fact that it's free to play, we're not charging you anything. You can come in and you can play for years and not give us a penny. I'd appreciate it if you did, but it's not the end of the world if you don't. You don't have that as a barrier to come in and access the game, and making sure that we hit as many different platforms as possible to make sure that we're accessible and that we're wide. If you have access to a PC or a console of some sort, and again, not everybody does, but a lot of people do. And if you don't, I'm sure you can find somebody you can borrow some time with. But the fact that it's free to play, we're not charging $60 or $70 for you to have this experience, is another way to sort of make sure that we keep this accessible and open to as many people as we can. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Tim. The next question actually has parts of that in it, so it might have been answered as well. But the next question is from Trung, and it's, if incorporating base level accessibility and neurodiversity is a win for all, why are people so reluctant to do so, and how do we get them to change their mind? I think it's just meant for all of you to answer, and I think you've all touched upon parts of this kind of question.
It costs money. That's what it boils down to. It is easier for a company to create a shooting game and not have to worry about creating different kind of characters, going with stock characters, stock avatars, and not worry about things like color blindness, for example. Not worry about things like, we created a ping system for Apex that allows you to ping elements within the game world, and your character will actually call them out for your teammates. And now that was done for two different ways. One, not everybody is comfortable speaking into a microphone and playing in a game. Oh, now everybody knows that I'm not a cishet male, and now I have all this toxic behavior getting leveraged at me, and that's not cool. This ping system takes it out of the entirely, but makes that accessibility part of the game. And it was actually so successful that as soon as we released it, every other battle royale game on the market immediately went out and copied it, which is fine. That's great, because now that accessibility is now becoming the standard. And that just makes gaming even more open and more accessible to more people, which at the end of the day, when I walk away from this, I want to leave things better than I found it. And this is one of the things that we've introduced that actually makes it more open for people, makes it more accessible, makes it more welcoming. They don't feel that, and you can still talk through your microphone if you choose, but if you choose not to, your teammates aren't going to see you any differently. You're going to be able to participate in the game and be effective in the game and contribute to the game and have a good time. But that kind of work costs money and many months of development, years of development. And unless it's a core pillar of the place where you're at, and I'm lucky to be at Respawn and to work for a company, Electronic Arts, where that is a core pillar of how we look at things. We are applying inclusive design lenses to everything that we do. I mentioned before, stuff like ethnicity and socioeconomic status, but ability as well. And that relates directly to like I said, the ping system that was included in Apex, and making sure that, we did it for the right reasons. And sure, it costs money up front to incorporate that into our design process. But you look at the results now, you look at how inclusive it is now, you look at the wide variety of people that we have playing the game now, and I think it's paid off exponentially. So it's actually good business to be accessible. Who would have thought?
Makes sense, since we all are coming from different spaces to whatever gaming or whatever environment. Does anyone else want to add to how when they're creating their ideas within these emerging technologies, knowing that they're not all accessible? And Doaa, you touched on this a lot earlier on your piece specifically, but like VR, for example, not a lot of people have headsets. So how do you approach, Paisley, when you work in that space, thinking about the accessibility of that world you're building?
Yeah, it's a huge issue, actually, obviously. For me, it's like if a tree falls in a forest, doesn't make a sound. Like if you make a digital world and no one can see it, what does it, like, where does it live? How does it exist? And so one thing, like, especially during the pandemic, when all the traveling to festivals and doing workshops and sharing work in person stopped, especially when you share headsets at a library, for example, or, museums where you have accessibility to this technology. I mean, I don't even have gear at home. Like I use shared tools with other people. So I started to think about these things. How do we share our virtual worlds online? And for things like porting from Oculus Rift to Quest can be quite costly, and the Quest is a more accessible headset. So one thing we've done is create, like, it's a lame kind of version of it, but projection of interactive spaces that you can share online, or actually project onto the walls, and then you sort of don't have this concern about tech access. And ways of making it less lame are by incorporating like cool things that come from the virtual space. Like, for example, we've incorporated sharing the mask that we created for the installation, or like other kind of more tactile and kind of like exciting pieces that kind of bring this space to life. But to the previous question, one thing I think about with accessibility and neurodiversity and just like inclusive thought process is not necessarily to do with money and the financial element. I think a lot of the time, like, people just forget or like don't think of asking other people. And so that's why, collaboration is so important. And by being really open with your story and your experience, like you can create something that's never been created before, because you put two very different people together and they created something that they collaborated on this idea. Like, you start to kind of see in a more holistic, open way and stop being so stuck in a certain perspective. So
definitely. Wonderful. Well, I think we're about it for questions. Thanks for everyone who joined questions, and thank you for our panelists, Tim, Doaa, Elliot, Paisley, for sharing your stories, sharing your artworks. Please, everyone, I hope your interest is piqued if you haven't been able to access or see pieces that all these creatives have participated or made themselves. If you're not in Vancouver, you can still play the game. You can still interact with the AR filters that are live. And please follow these artists digitally and reach out and follow their beautiful work. And thank you, Jorge, and the Vancouver Library for hosting, and Winter Arts. It's been a joy to work with everybody and get to know everybody. So I will hand it back over to Jorge to close us out. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Julia, for handling this conversation, and to Paisley, Elliot, Doaa, and Tim for sharing all your insights and your wonderful art. It was incredible to see all the creations that you do. And as Julia said, I would encourage everyone to go out into the city to see the works in real life. Now, if you want to watch this event again, or you want to share it with your friends, this event was live streamed to the VPL YouTube channel, and it will be uploaded to the Vancouver Mural Festival's YouTube channel as well. So you can find it there. We're going to share a link to our playlist where that's going to appear soon. So if you want to share with friends that weren't able to attend, you can watch it there. Also, we would love it if you gave us feedback about this event. As a public institution, our job is to do programs that work for you. So your feedback is very important, so we keep getting better at this. So we're going to share a link to a form on the chat, which should take you about a minute to fill out. So please do that. I promise you, it won't go into a dark hole of the internet. We actually sit together as a team and look at your feedback to make sure we keep getting better at this. Now, if you want to find out about more events like this, the library does a lot of events, right? 9,000 per year, not exaggerating. So follow us on social media or sign up for our newsletter so you can stay in the loop. There's a newsletter link that I will share in a second. And speaking of more events, before I let you all go, I want to share about a couple events that are coming up before we wrap up. So you can see them on your screen right now. So tomorrow at noon, as part of Black History Month, we're hosting a conversation with 4 star Black athletes. And they're going to be talking about diversity, inclusion, and equity in sports. So again, that's a lunchtime event tomorrow. So I hope you can join us back tomorrow. And then next Wednesday, we are doing an event with filmmaker and writer Chuck Kwan. And he just wrote an amazing book on Chinese restaurants around the world and the cultural importance that the restaurants have for all the communities where they exist. So literally, he went to 5 continents and visited restaurants in 18 countries to just talk to people in the communities there. So that's going to be next Wednesday. So I hope you can all join us. And then lastly, on March 8th, we'll have the launch of the Indigenous Storyteller in Residence, Eden Fine Day. So stay tuned on all our channels because there's going to be a big announcement for that one. So I hope you can join us for that. There's going to be music and some poetry reading, and it's going to be awesome. That's it for tonight. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to all our presenters and panelists. And it's been lovely to have you on stage. So thank you so much. We're going to keep the event open for another few minutes, just in case people in the audience want to click on some of the links that we shared or ask us anything, or if you want to interact with each other on the link. But in the meantime, I'm going to leave the stage and the panelists are going to leave the stage now, but we're going to keep the event open. So thank you all for being here. Have a lovely night.